For 15 years, my own family treated me like a lackey, until the CEO they courted called me boss. Christmas Eve, 6:12 p.m., Fairfield County. My mother's text lit up full setup. Only 35 people. Translation stage. The house runs sound and lights, staff the floor, and keep my mouth shut. I looked at my flight to Florida at the board deck for a $2 million two-year contract with Pinnacle Hospitality, and at the years I'd spent carrying chairs while being told I had nothing better to do. I didn't argue. I texted 3 emergency caterers, noted the holiday surcharge, zipped my suitcase, and headed to JFK. When they walked into a gleaming empty kitchen an hour later, Mom went paper pale. But that was only the opening act. At 9:00 a.m. on December 26th, in a glass boardroom overlooking the Atlantic, the very CEO my family had hustled to impress stepped in, shook my hand and said, "Good to finally meet, boss." Pens clicked, contracts signed, and with one polite phone call after the ink was dry, the entire Hale family hierarchy flipped from entitlement to invoice. Stay with me. I'll show you the receipts, the club email thanking my father for my unpaid labor, the HOA fine for their disastrous party, the photo of pizza on Waterford Crystal, and the single clause that protected my company while I took my life back. When blood demands free work, what's the price of peace? And would you have told them sooner or let the contract speak like I did? I am Grant Hale. 34, eldest son of the Hale family of Fairfield County, makes his living building other people's big nights. I'm the founder of Atlas Live and Events, rigging, trust dialing, DMX staging rooms until they look like magic and run like clockwork. I can make a ballroom breathe. What I have never been allowed to do, at least at home, is say no. At 6:12 p.m. on Christmas Eve, my phone chimed on the kitchen island of my parents' house. Full setup. Only 35 people, my mother texted as if she were ordering extra place cards. In our family, only is code. Only means my time is free. Only means my dignity is negotiable. I stared at the words while the oven ticked and the windows threw back the early winter dark. Then opened my email and saw a fresh message from the Greenwich Crest Country Club. Thank you for your in-kind contribution, $12,500. Addressed to Thomas Hale. Attached was a donor form my father had submitted. On the line for services provided, someone had typed in block letters. AV lighting, staging. I knew exactly what that meant. 6 overnight load-ins, 3 strikeouts, and 2 holiday weekends. My hands, my crew, my gear collapsed into a courtesy line under my father's name. A pat on the head, itemized. I took a photo of the email, then opened the family thread. I didn't argue or explain. I replied, all with 3 emergency hotlines for caterers, who were still answering on the 24th, drop-off trays, maybe 1 on-call server. If they could rustle someone, holiday surcharge, noted order cutoff times in bold. I added availability not guaranteed. Please coordinate directly, and toggled my phone to do not disturb. Then I opened the airline app. JFK to Fort Lauderdale, red-eye, 10:55 p.m., aisle seat near the wing. I bought the ticket and watched the digital boarding pass appear like a small green door. This is where someone will ask why I didn't tell them off sooner. Why 34 and not 19? The truth is less cinematic. You learn to keep the house quiet. You are told you are good with your hands, useful with chairs and cables, and you confuse usefulness with love. You promise yourself you will never take a dime of family money, so you build your company on an SBA microloan and overtime rigging shows nobody sees. You tell yourself you'll stop once you've made it, and then made it keeps moving. I drove to the Atlas warehouse on the edge of town to grab a spare case. The place smelled like paint and cold aluminum. Truss lengths leaned like spare bones. Coils of black cable were labeled by universe and channel. Gaff tape bit the pad of my thumb when I tore a strip to retag a case lid. Every object there had been paid for twice, once in dollars, once in hours. Nobody in my family would ever count. I powered down the lights, locked the roll-up door, and sat in my car until the heat found my hands. On the way to JFK, I checked the board deck for Pinnacle Hospitality one more time. 2-year master services, 5 Florida resorts, $250,000 minimum per quarter, net 30 CEOI clean. I wasn't thinking about revenge, I was thinking about payroll, about the rigger who just put a down payment on a duplex, about the line cooks in our catering network who were counting on January hours. At the gate, the terminal windows reflected a man in a winter coat who looked like me, and also like a stranger. I texted a final note to myself. Next year, no in kind without the right name on it. When the plane pushed back, my phone buzzed one last time. "If you leave, don't come back," my mother wrote. I watched the letters sit there, a dare dressed as love. I switched to airplane mode and tucked the phone face down in the seat pocket. There's a kind of quiet that follows a hard no. It's not peace, not yet. It's the hinge of a door that has been stuck for 15 years beginning to move. People think the moment happens in a boardroom. Mine started here on a runway lined with blue lights, with a boarding pass and the first honest boundary I'd ever set. You want to know why it took me that long? To answer that, I have to go back to the first time I learned that helping out at home didn't mean helping, it meant disappearing. 15 years of helping out taught me that in our house service looked noble as long as someone else got the credit. The first time I learned that was a holiday montage. I can still feel in my back. Thanksgiving, I backed a rental truck to the service door while German sedans, all leased and gleaming, crawled up the driveway. I walked folding tables through wet leaves, taped down cable runs beneath Persian rugs, set the dimmers to warm so the turkey looked like it came from a magazine, not an oven. Inside, Sloane stood by the fireplace, tipping her champagne flute toward a camera and a story about gratitude that forgot to include the hands that set the room. By the 4th of July, the playlist changed, but not the cast. The patio's single outlet tripped if you glanced at it, so I brought a whisper quiet generator marked coolers by heat zones and staged ice like a supply chain. When fireworks lifted over the sound, people cheered and Sloane posed on a stone wall while someone captured her against the sky. Later, her photo made the Greenwich Crest Bulletin. My name lived only on a rental receipt and the back of my hand in Sharpie: return by 10 a.m. or pay another day. Weddings were where the math got real. Country clubs are their own little countries. At Greenwich Crest, the manager didn't smile until you handed over a COI with limits that made your stomach drop. Load-in windows were 30 minutes wide. Miss it, and you were a tuxedoed ghost. Safety brief at the top of the hour, no ladders on polished floors without mats, no open drinks near the lighting tree. I checked the DMX patch twice and then again because one bad address in the first dance happened in interrogation lighting. Staff would ask, "You with the Hales?" and I'd say, "Tonight I'm with the vendors." No one in my family corrected the record. Somewhere between a sparkler exit and a Monday morning, I realized I had a business if I had the nerve to name it. I started as a freelance rigger for bands that moved their own cases, talked my way into ballroom AV for charities that paid. When the gala glow wore off and learned hotels by the smell of fresh paint and panic, I bought a used console before I bought a couch. The day a venue said, "We'll need your COI by Friday," and I answered, "You'll have it Tuesday," something clicked. An SBA microloan hit. I stenciled Atlas on road cases in a rented garage with a door that stuck in winter and a puddle the size of Delaware in spring. I kept my last name off the paperwork. Low profile wasn't shyness, it was armor. If Atlas wasn't obviously a hail, I couldn't be shaken down for in-kind every time a calendar flipped to red. Work grew crooked the way real growth does. A nonprofit gala led to a medical conference, a conference to a hotel referral, a referral to a week I only saw my bed on Sunday. I hired James for ops because he could look at a ballroom and hear the labor math. Maria came through our catering network. She could make drop-off trays look plated if you gave her a table hot boxes in 10 quiet minutes. Marcus, our CFO, sat with me at midnight reminding me that a contract isn't revenue until the deposit clears. We paid time and a half on holidays from day one because I remembered my own skin after those nights. Respect isn't a speech, it's a line item. Most mornings I stood in that damp garage with a coffee and wrote the week on a whiteboard, load in Windows safety briefs, truck rolls, whose inbox needed the COI who had to be on the floor for the DMX test because one wrong universe could sink an opening queue. There's a holiness to a good crew, short shouts, clean lifts, nobody letting the youngest haul the heaviest case alone. That's why I loved the work. It returned to me what the house took. Silence wasn't fear, it was focus. Keep your head down, pay your people, and let the room speak when the lights come up. The Inc. 5000 letter arrived with an embossed seal and language about growth curves that made me feel seen by strangers. I didn't show it to my parents. Visibility at home came with a bill I could no longer afford. I hung the letter where only my team would see it, and we ate pizza off a road case because the folding table was out on a job. Maria joked we should frame the grease stain. James said to tape the letter to the truck so we'd remember what it took to move it. On the week Pinnacle's deck finally sang, I printed payroll and laid it across the workbench. 50-plus names, each with a mortgage, a brace, tightening on a teenager's teeth, a rent check that couldn't bounce. I set both palms on the paper and told the cold air what I needed to hear. I can't be their free labor and my team's leader at the same time. The sentence didn't echo. It anchored. That afternoon, I ran a quick check at Greenwich Crest for a client load. The lobby smelled like oranges and polish. The manager's face thawed a degree when I handed over the updated COI. On the bulletin board beneath Sloane's perfect July smile, a reminder about guest traffic and late-night noise in holiday weeks. Read like a velvet threat. My phone pulsed once in my pocket, then again urgent, then again like a storm alert while the sky stays blue. I let it buzz. Across town, ovens sat cold and a kitchen gleamed empty. The fuse was lit, and for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the one holding the match. I kept my phone face down on the tray table and watched the wing cut a clean line through the dark. Somewhere below the Hale dining room glowed like a magazine spread waiting on a magician. It got a magician all right, just not the one they expected. Vendors were dark on Christmas Eve. That's not attitude, that's the calendar. When my mother realized there would be no chefs, no servers, no only 35, Miracle Panic went retail. They called 3 caterers and got voicemail trees. Then someone in the kitchen whispered the most American sentence of the night. We can still get pizza. They ordered by the stack. Boxes arrived sweating at the edges, steam trapped under cardboard red logos bright as sirens. A cousin, resourceful in the wrong way, lifted Waterford crystal out of the china cabinet and began plating slices like relics. I can picture the knife marks on the table leaf, the lace placemats, the centerpieces warming by the minute under halogen cans nobody knew how to dim. VIPs stood, checked watches, and made that tight smile people make when they're calculating exits. By 8:45, a banker begged off with the line about early church. By 9:10, a PR friend drifted for the coat room. The sound in the room turned from conversation to cutlery to cardboard. I didn't see it in real time. I saw the aftermath, which is worse. A delivery kid I know from gigs, his brother used to help me strike ballrooms. DM'd me a photo and a single line, "Dude, is this your family?" In the shot, a slice of pepperoni balanced on a Waterford salad plate, its scalloped rim reflecting grease halos like a stained glass window. A half-drunk Cabernet sat beside a Domino's box. In the background, the kitchen island looked like a set abandoned mid-scene. I laughed, but there was iron in it. They wanted a performance. They got a mirror. The internet did what the internet does even on holidays. The pizzeria posted a story to boost their delivery crew, "Big Night Merry Christmas Fairfield," and tagged the street because the driver loved the light display on our block. Someone in the Greenwich Crest community chat recognized the address immediately. Screenshots flew. The club board's secretary, who makes courtesy sound like jurisprudence, sent a crisp note to my parents' inboxes. "We understand last evening's gathering did not proceed as planned. Please be mindful that private events promoted as high-profile dinners reflect upon the club when guest lists overlap. We appreciate adherence to standards. In club language, that's a yellow card." By morning, another envelope arrived with a different tone. Old Mill Estates HOA cited CCNR violations for unauthorized event parking, and after-hours guest traffic passed, posted quiet time. The fine was $750 due in 10 days, payable by check or portal. There is nothing theoretical about a compliance letter. It's a bill with a sermon printed in 10-point type. My mother forwarded it to the family thread with a message that began, "How could this happen?" and ended with, "This is what you did to us." The ledger got heavier. Housekeeping couldn't come Christmas Day, and holiday crews don't work for gratitude. The firm my parents finally reached sent a holiday after-hours invoice, $1 and $240 for deep clean, $180 linens to repress and spot treat, $150 call-out for a second pair of hands who left her own children to wrangle wax strips and tomato oil from Damask. The line items read like a diary: glassware to be rewashed, silver to be polished, floors to be lifted and matted to hide soot gouges where someone dragged a chair. Respect is a cost. It shows up where you least like to see it. From my aisle seat, I watched the cabin dim and thought of the quiet choreography my team runs on nights like this. Lists, printed windows, honored briefings done on the minute, and felt again the heat that had raised in me when I saw that in-kind contribution under my father's name. I turned the phone over once and back again. Every ping was a little theater trying to summon me back to the wings. The show would go on without me now. That was the point. Around daybreak, while the plane angled toward the Atlantic coast and Fort Lauderdale winked awake, an email slid into my inbox from a name that mattered. "Flying in late rough night in Connecticut," wrote Victoria Chen. "See you at 7 p.m. tonight for the pre-meet and 9 a.m. tomorrow." Looking forward, I read it twice. She'd been in the room they built to impress her. Now she was walking into mine. The kitchen in Fairfield could be polished to a shine. The boardroom would be lit on purpose. I checked into the Pinnacle Resort just after sunrise, the Atlantic winking through a wall of glass like a witness with a secret. The lobby smelled of eucalyptus and fresh coffee, a mercy after a night of recycled air. Upstairs, the conference floor was all quiet carpet and power outlets placed exactly where you'd want them. I laid my deck on the console and breathed once like a diver leveling pressure. Last night belonged to Fairfield's dining room. Today belonged to the room with a contract. Scope first, because scope is gravity. My slides walked the lane we'd promised: AV design and operation, staging and scenic with OSHA-compliant decking, floor staffing with a trained supervisor per 40 guests, and coordination with our vetted catering network. So the kitchen spoke the same language as the stage. SLAs were clean and not poetic response within 1 business hour. On-site escalation within 30. Equipment redundancy for critical paths. Net 30 on all invoices, late fees at 5% per month. The master service agreement ran 24 months with automatic renewal by mutual consent. Minimum spend of $250,000 per quarter across Pinnacle's 5 Florida properties. The key person clause named me for kickoff and quarterly business reviews only. It protected their confidence and my ability to lead without being chained to every ribbon cutting with a handheld mic. Marcus called while I was marking the last slide. "Grant, look at me," he said, and I could hear him take off his glasses the way he does when he wants the sentence to land. "Don't let the house drag you backward. Money's made looking forward. Sign what's right, pass on what isn't, and leave Fairfield out of the boardroom." I told him I would. He grunted the way a man does when he's moved a couch up 2 flights and doesn't want applause. Before he hung up, he added, "And if they push for an exclusivity rider outside Florida, we walk." James texted 3 photos from the ballroom downstairs truck at dock. Cable mats laid like black rivers, crew badges lined up by the service door. COIs had already gone to the resort's risk manager, who replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a proper PDF, which is the language of true faith. James's caption was simple: "Florida crew locked." Maria chimed in a minute later. "Catering partner staged at T90, 2 hot boxes in reserve." No heroics, just competence, the kind that looks easy until you ask it to show up on a holiday. An email from Victoria slid into my inbox while I was spreadsheeting labor hours. "A lot of crystal. A lot of pizza," she wrote. No names, no adjectives that would haunt a deposition, just the kind of sentence a seasoned executive sends when she's seen a small tragedy dressed in best clothes. I typed back, "We'll make tonight uneventful in all the right ways. Pre-meet at 7. She replied with a single word, "Good." I took a legal pad to the window and wrote the things decks can't hold. Indemnity was mutual, capped at fees paid in the preceding 12 months. Force majeure stripped of the mischief some people try to tuck into it. Change orders required written sign-off with cost and time impact. Overtime rates and holiday surcharges were not a surprise but a calendar fact. Cancellation inside 72 hours triggered a sliding scale. Inside 24, full freight. I underlined marketing permissions twice. No one would use our images to sell a vision we didn't build. Then I wrote the line that mattered to me more than the numbers: "Sign MSA, but keep mouth shut morals clause." If the universe tests boundaries, it picks holidays. The last 24 hours had taught me enough about temptations dressed as vindication. By mid-afternoon, the pre-production room looked like a pocket version of a war room. Scenic swatches lay next to a 3D render of the main ballroom. A spare console sat under a dust cover like a second parachute. And the run of show lived on a board with magnets for each cue. James and I walked timing together: doors at 6:30. Pre-meet at 700, house to half. At 7:05, sizzle reel at 7:07. And then the measured, unflashy rhythm that makes a brand feel inevitable. We checked ADA seating, double-checked fire egress, because a good event is a safe one, and ran the DMX test, all green. Somewhere in those minutes, the knot between my shoulder blades loosened. At 6, my phone flashed a new message from Marcus. Attorney flagged one line in Section 9 marketing: use of likeness. Cross it out in pen before signing. We'll initial both sides. I slid a pen into my inside pocket and felt the calm that comes when you know your tools are within reach. Down the hall, a staffer wheeled in a tray, coffee water, a silver bowl of limes, for no reason except someone cared how a room looked when people made decisions in it. At 6:52, I stood alone for a breath in the glass-walled boardroom. Below, pools glowed and palm trees made their practiced sway. The table was set with folders, name tents, and nothing decorative enough to distract a person from reading. My deck was stitched into the house system, the opening travel shot muted to a hum, so even the HVAC wouldn't have to compete. In the black mirror of the glass, I could see a man in a suit that fit. Not because a tailor was brilliant, but because a boy had finally measured himself and decided to stop shrinking. The elevator chimed. Voices approached steady and unhurried. I picked up the pen Marcus had told me to carry and laid it beside the signature flag on the MSA. The door opened. Victoria stepped in with 2 directors and the resort GM in her wake. She met my eye the faintest smile a person can allow, while still keeping professional distance. "Mr. Hale," she said, extending a hand. "Shall we?" I nodded, slid the lead slide forward, and felt the room gather itself like a lung before a word. 9 a.m. was a page turn away. What none of us knew yet was who would walk in late and what name she would say first. I took my seat at the head of the glass table at 8:59 and let the room settle. The Atlantic was a blue bar behind Victoria's shoulder. The pinnacle crest floated on the display like a seal waiting for wax. I opened with what matters to people who sign checks, not promises plans. We walked the multi-resort rollout like a timed drill. 5 Florida properties, 1 standard, no improvisation that isn't planned. AV design mapped to each ballroom's load limits. Staging packages with OSHA deck heights and handrails. Staffing matrices that put a trained floor supervisor on every 40 guests and a single command channel, so kitchen, stage, and service talk in one voice. I pointed to the contingency column equipment. Redundancy on all critical paths, a hot spare console in a road case within 20 feet of every main, a backup power plan that doesn't depend on hope. I gave them the 89th minute case study because everyone wants to know what you do when it goes wrong. We had a keynote lose power at Greenwich Crest in July. Our crew rolled from house to half in under 90 seconds, swapped to the spare feed, and brought the room back without the MC breaking cadence. Slides never show sweat, but they remember tempo. I showed them the quick rig plan, color-coded universes, pre-addressed fixtures. Cable mats laid like black rivers where heels and wheels won't snag, and I saw a director's jaw unclench. "COIs are already on file with your risk team," I said. "And our holiday surcharges are published. No surprises, only schedules." A knock at the door. Victoria's assistant slipped in with an iPad and a look I know from ops. "Something has entered the chat." She placed it by Victoria's elbow. On the screen, a slice of pepperoni sat in a Waterford salad plate like a jewel that didn't know where it came from. The caption was festive, the share count wasn't. Victoria exhaled through her nose the tiniest tell, then angled the tablet toward me for a beat and away again. "I stopped in Connecticut last night," she said, level to the room. Briefly. The GM cleared his throat. The directors studied their hands. I advanced the slide and kept the metronome steady. When we broke for questions, there weren't many. That's what happens when you make the hard parts look like muscle memory. Victoria stood palm open. "Good to finally meet, boss." The word wasn't a joke. It landed like a verdict. Her grip was dry and confident. Somewhere inside the console, a fan hummed. We sat again, and I slid the MSA forward with the flagged page Marcus had told me to cross out. She read each tab, asked one question about the minimum quarterly spend, nodded at the key person clause, and uncapped her pen. The click was small and ceremonial. We both signed initials at the crossouts, full names where the lawyers had set the traps. "Respect like a contract needs signatures," I said, "more to the paper than the people." Victoria's mouth twitched. "And enforcement," she added. I caught her eye and gave a small nod. She lifted her phone, placed it face up on the table, and hit speaker. "Margaret," she said when the line connected. Her voice carried that careful warmth executives learn in rooms full of glass. "Victoria Chen, I wanted to thank you for hosting last night." A pause. My mother's Connecticut cadence filled the air, all apology and gloss. Victoria didn't interrupt. When there was space, she said, I also wanted to let you know I've just signed a 2-year agreement with the gentleman you told me wouldn't amount to much. Mr. Hale will be leading our work. The silence on our end wasn't a silence at all. It was a held breath. On hers, it was a canyon. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then the faintest clatter as if a ring had touched a glass. A thread of air moved in the speaker and my mother's voice arrived, but it's smaller than I remembered it. I see. Victoria's tone didn't change. We'll be in touch through counsel for any future inquiries. I reached and tapped the screen to end the call before either of us mistook closure for conversation. Then I turned back to the agenda slide labeled Implementation Week 1 and felt the room's heartbeat return to its work pace. The GM recovered first. About the January medical conference, he said. We mapped crew to load in windows and staggered breaks to miss the keynote. A director asked about ADA sightlines. We moved a camera riser on the plan. Victoria signed 2 more internal forms, then closed her folder and stood. 9 a.m. delivered on time, she said. That bodes well for opening nights. We shook hands again, less ceremony, more habit. As they filed out, my phone vibrated against the leather like a trapped bee. It was the family thread, blooming red, Sloan asking if this was a prank, my father writing, call me a neighbor, forwarding the HOA letter with an unhelpful yikes. I slid the phone back into my pocket. The glass wall gave me back my own face in daylight, less boy than the day before. Somewhere in Connecticut, a kitchen would smell like lemon oil and resolve. Somewhere in Florida, a ballroom waited to be built. When the elevator chimed again, I looked up, half expecting another director. Instead, the receptionist stepped in with a single envelope addressed in my father's hand. By the time I slid the envelope from my father into my briefcase, the day had already begun to bend toward consequences. The first one arrived as a forward from a mutual contact at Greenwich Crest, a short, unsentimental note from the club secretary reminding members that private functions promoted as VIP dinners must meet house standards when guest lists include fellow members. It wasn't scandal. It was censure. In our world, that hurts more. The second ping was sharper. Sloan's firm had been dropped by a legacy client, an insurance group that sponsors the club's summer charity. Their note was polite and terminal. In light of last evening, we are changing direction for 2026. Reputation is a currency. It devalues quickly when it smells like cardboard and cold cheese. Pride tried to fix what pride had broken. By noon, my parents had authorized an apology brunch to erase the memory of pizza on Waterford. They did what people who live inside circles do. Called a friend who knew a guy, who called a broker, who called a white label vendor that could materialize bodies, gear, and linen on a holiday week, with a smile and a surcharge. The club agreed to host in the side ballroom, no publicity, no speeches, plenty of flowers. It would be tasteful, quiet, and above all, not a joke. I wasn't invited, but logistics talks. In the service lane off the club's south entrance, a box truck kissed the loading dock. 2 hands rolled out flight cases with black tape crossing the panels where company marks usually live. A stack of chrome risers flashed under winter sun. A coil of Socapex thudded down like a sleeping python. A wheeled hotbox sighed open with steam. A maitre d' from the club born. Knowing the difference between polish and glare, checked the run sheet, then pointed the crew to the freight elevator. Everyone moved the way professionals do when time is short and the room has opinions. Inside the ballroom, the white label crew built the apology the way you build a memory you want other people to have. A simple stage, not showy. Uplights feathered into the crown molding. A pair of discreet speakers because volume is vulgar before noon. They laid the runner and checked the load-in window like church ushers. They dressed the tables in cream, polished the glassware to diamond set a coffee station that looked like a promise. It would have remained a ghost operation, a professional secret behind a taped-over name, if not for one small thing that never makes a plan: gravity. As a case rounded the corner at the service corridor, the edge of a gaff tape strip lost its grip. The tape curled back in slow motion the way leaves let go in October. A letter surfaced, then another white on black block print you could read from across a ballroom. Atlas. The rest of the word followed like a verdict. A server froze. The maitre d' blinked. Margaret stood 6 feet away, wrapped in a cardigan the color of certainty, and stared at the case as if it had said her name. Eyes traveled from the panel to her face and back again, the way audiences look when they realize a play is based on a true story. The crew chief, a good man who knows discretion is part of the service, reached to press the tape back into place. It was too late. Names once seen don't become anonymous again. The apology brunch went forward because money is a solvent. The food was elegant, the coffee generous, and the string trio pretended they hadn't noticed the way conversations hushed when the word on the cases passed from table to table. My mother did what she's always done, curated composure. She thanked the right people and avoided the ones who needed more than words. My father handled the other side of dignity. When the broker presented the invoice, its math was not shy. Holiday rush surcharge at 30%. Overtime at time and a half for every hour past posted labor. Additional line for emergency linen because of supply chain constraints. The total cleared 5 figures without asking permission. Thomas took a pen, signed the credit authorization, and wrote, "Paid," in the memo line with a pressure that left a groove you could feel from the back of the page. Saving face has a price. The receipt fits in a wallet. Back at the resort, James sent me a photo from the dock, our cases lined in a neat row, taped clean because we weren't hiding from anyone here. I looked at the image and heard my own voice in my head, steady as a level. Every professional road they take still runs through me. It wasn't triumph so much as plumbing. Networks are systems. You can ignore where the water comes from until the day you can't. The aftermath was as modern as the cause. The club sent a second email, softer this time, offering guidance on hosting standards and attaching a PDF that every member pretends to have read. Sloan forwarded a message from another client with a subject line that began with regret. A neighbor added me to a thread I didn't ask for, where people who like each other's lawns more than their lives traded theories about who had planned what and why. I didn't answer any of them. The boardroom had shown me what mattered. Work signed in ink, not in family threads. At 3:30, my phone began to thrum in a pattern that used to mean duty and now meant choice. Margaret, then Thomas, then Sloan. Calls, texts, voice memos, each carrier pigeon wearing the same note: call us. I set the phone down beside the signed MSA. Let it buzz against the leather until the vibration became a metronome, and waited to see whether the next screen name would be the one I couldn't afford to ignore. I stepped onto the balcony outside the boardroom and let the Atlantic wind cool the heat that family leaves behind. My phone buzzed in a stuttering rhythm on the railing. Margaret, then Sloan, then Thomas, each message. Hunting a version of me that used to rush home and fix it. I answered my mother, because you should always be clear the moment you draw a line. She began with blame stacked neatly like good silver. I didn't let it tarnish the call. Ground rules, I said. No name-calling, no history lessons, no threats. We speak in facts, invoices, fines, commitments. If you can't agree to that, we hang up and try again later. Sea air moved through the speaker. She said fine in a tone that meant anything but. Fact, I said. The Greenwich Crest Notice. When you bill a dinner as VIP, the house expects VIP standards. Fact. The HOA fined $750 due in 10 days for late guest traffic and an unauthorized event. Fact. Yesterday's apology brunch came with a 30% holiday rush surcharge and overtime at time and a half. Dad signed paid. Fact. I texted you 3 emergency caterer hotlines. You chose not to use them. She tried to pivot to family duty. I didn't let her. Honor doesn't mean free labor. Honor means you plan, you pay, and you don't disguise favors as obligations. You humiliated us, she said softer now, as if volume could revise the ledger. No, I answered. You made choices. The bill came due in public. She reached for the oldest weapon in our house. We're family. I kept my voice level. Then we'll act like one with boundaries. I will not be the help in my own story. The line switched hands. My father's breath found the microphone before his voice did. Grant, he said, tired in the way a person gets when he's carried silence like a piano, I did something I'm not proud of. He told me about the envelope last August Inc. 5000's letter naming Atlas Live to the list. It had arrived at the house because I'd never changed an old registration. He'd tucked it in a drawer to spare Margaret the news. He admitted he knew the donor plaque at Greenwich Crest credited Thomas Hale for an in-kind contribution that was 6 of my unpaid overnight bills. He'd let the lie stand because the truth would have started a fight he didn't want to have. I mistook quiet for peace, he said. It wasn't. I let the wind fill the space between us. Thank you for saying it, I said. Now we do the adult part. I opened my laptop on the balcony table, drafted a PDF, and read the terms aloud so no one could pretend not to hear. Family agreement. 1, equal respect in private and public, no more introductions that shrink me down. 2, public apology at Greenwich Crest addressed to the members you misled. 3, 8 therapy sessions with a licensed family counselor. Scheduled to be set this week. 4, no requested or implied unpaid labor. Any services from Atlas Live require a written scope contract invoice and on-time payment. 5, any in-kind contributions must name the actual provider. No more laundering my work through your reputation. I paused. Sign by week's end. If that's too much, we take a break from contact until it isn't. Margaret tried to negotiate the apology into a private letter. No, I said. The embarrassment was public. The amends will be too, Thomas exhaled. Send it, he said, voice threaded with something that sounded like relief and regret trying to share a chair. I sent the DocuSign link and watched the read receipts light up in sequence, the way runway lamps do when a pilot lines up for landing. My phone kept buzzing like a toothache cousin's neighbors. People who love a group thread more than they love a phone call. I switched on Do Not Disturb and put the screen face down. Then breathed until my heart stopped arguing with my ribs. Boundaries are a calm you can practice. If the universe tests boundaries, it picks holidays, I murmured and wrote it down, so I wouldn't forget when the next demand arrived wearing a bow. Inside, Victoria's communications lead had emailed a draft of the partnership announcement for my approval. The title was a mouthful and mercifully accurate. We aligned on a 4:00 p.m., Eastern Post, Pinnacle, First Atlas, second, no mention of family, no victory laps, just the work and the numbers. I added one line of guardrail that mattered to me. Atlas adheres to a strict morals clause regarding clients' treatment of workers and vendors. It wasn't a subtweet, it was policy. I typed approved and hovered over send. The phone lit up again, bypassing DND with a priority flag I hadn't given it. Greenwich Crest's club president. The caller ID sat there like a closed door with someone standing behind it. I watched the ring timer count down and asked myself the only question that ever matters at a boundary. Is this about respect or control? The timer hit one and I reached for the screen. I approved the release at 4 o'clock and watched the clock edge past the top of the hour like a baton handoff. Pinnacle's announcement went first, a clean headline about a multi-resort partnership, a handshake photo in front of their crest, bullet points about safety staffing ratios and service level guarantee. When Atlas reposted, we mirrored the restraint. No family, no subtext, nothing you'd be ashamed to print and frame. The photo said enough: two professionals doing a deal in daylight. I set up in a temporary office off the resort's back hallway, a rolling chair, a power strip, and my laptop stacked on a flight case lid. On one screen, our press kit, on the other, a dashboard that counts what people do instead of what they say. The graph started flat, then rose in a clean slope you could set your watch by. Clicks on the safety brief. Downloads of the ADA layout standards. The careers page lighting up in Florida zip codes. It wasn't noise. It was attention with intent. Requests for proposal began to land with the soft thud of opportunity. A hospital network wanted bids on a quarterly town hall. A museum in St. Augustine asked for a spring gala plan with union labor. A regional bank wanted to know our SLA response window on power loss and whether we trained ushers for evacuations. We do. My operations lead spun up a pipeline and started matching the right crews to the right rooms. Work is a solvent. It carries yesterday's smoke off skin. Pinnacle's LinkedIn post crossed its first milestone in under an hour. Most comments were the predictable blend of congratulations and networking. A few were from members of Greenwich Crest whose names I knew well enough to greet in a hallway. Well earned, one wrote. Glad to see safety and standards prioritized, another added. No winks, no whispers, just public words that carry weight in small circles. I read each and felt a muscle unclench that I hadn't realized I was bracing. A reporter, gentle and persistent, tried to open the door I had already closed. Any comment on your personal story, he wrote. I sent back the sentence we'd agreed to, the one that will read the same 10 years from now as it does today: no comment on private family matters. Atlas speaks through its team's work, our safety record, and our commitments to staff and vendors. He asked if I'd reconsider. I didn't. I walked the line I'd drawn clear, courteous, and not an inch beyond. At 5:30, the post hit a second threshold and tripped an alert on the dashboard. Sloane's text arrived a few breaths later, a question that sounded like an accusation. Why humiliate us? I typed and deleted before my hands found the version that didn't pour gasoline on anything. I didn't. The work spoke. 3 dots bubbled, then vanished. Sometimes silence is the first honest thing people say. I drafted a short internal note for my team because wins belong to the people who lift road cases and coil cable without tangles. I thanked Maria for designing a load plan that a hotelier could read and respect. I nodded to James for staging a Florida hiring day on 72 hours' notice. I reminded them of the clause we'd added that afternoon, the morals line about how we expect clients to treat our people. This is not shade, I wrote. It's a standard. We keep it or we walk. Emails kept arriving. One from a competing resort, cautious in tone but clear in interest. One from a school district about graduation ceremonies and weather plans. One from a small veterans nonprofit in Daytona asking if we ever discount for Gold Star families. We do. We will. Not everything has to be a headline to be the right thing. Near 6 DocuSign chimed with a new status. The family agreement had moved. Thomas Hale signed. Margaret Hale viewed. Sloane Hale viewed. The system shows timestamps down to the minute the way a courtroom would. I watched the numbers settle on the screen, felt the wind through the cracked window lift the edge of a paper, and heard my own voice steady itself for whatever came next. I didn't go public to hurt you. I went public to stop you from rewriting me. I set the laptop down and waited to see whether viewed would become signed or whether the next boundary would need sturdier hinges. I watched the DocuSign dashboard like a pilot scans instruments. Thomas signed. Margaret and Sloane viewed. The resort air conditioner hummed through the vent, a neutral witness. It was time to take the last piece of ambiguity and nail it to paper. I drafted the family agreement addendum and read it aloud to myself before I hit send, each line a plank in a bridge I could actually stand on. Friends and family rate. 0%, no discounts, no favors dressed as love. All services require a written scope, contract invoice, and scheduled crew. Payment on standard net 30 terms, net 0 discount. Any in-kind contributions must credit the actual provider by name in all acknowledgments. No requests for unpaid labor implied or otherwise. I added a cover note that wasn't poetry, just policy, if respect is real, sign under it. 5 minutes later, Thomas replied from his law firm account with 2 words I had never heard from him without a qualifier. We accept. A second email followed from his personal address with a wire confirmation for the reconciliation dinner at Greenwich Crest. The memo line was clinical and somehow decent: deposit room labor, AV catering coordination. My phone vibrated with the bank's push alert, a breath after payment received. I forwarded both messages to Marcus with a 2-word directive we've used since our first high school gig in a church basement. Log it. He answered with a ledger entry, a job code, and a reminder that deposits are non-refundable inside holiday windows. Not a threat, not a flourish, just the way adults keep promises clear. In the same thread, James chimed in with a draft, run of show, and a staffing plan that accounted for load-in windows, the club's safety brief, and a polite buffer between my family and my crew. Boundaries have to be operational, not just aspirational. Margaret's reply arrived without punctuation, the way messages do when people are typing faster than they're thinking. We will review, but this is unnecessary and hurtful. I let the cursor blink on an empty reply box until my pulse remembered it didn't work for hers. Then I sent what I could live with in daylight. Necessary is just a word for what you ignored until it cost you. We proceed by contract, not memory. The LinkedIn counters kept climbing in another tab, and emails continued to land with the clean weight of work, an RFP from a hospital network. A veterans nonprofit asking about Gold Star families, a cautious note from a competing resort. The room felt less like a battlefield and more like what it was, a temporary office where a business was being run. Revenge had never been the plan. Standards were. At 6:41 p.m., DocuSign chimed again. Thomas Hale completed, Sloane Hale signed. Margaret Hale viewed. The system stamped the minute like a court clerk. A beat later, my calendar flashed an invitation from Dr. Eliza Warren's office, 8 sessions Thursdays at 5. Beginning January 8th. Accepted, Thomas Sloane. Tentative, Margaret. I clicked accept for myself and listened to the air handler hum while I waited to see if tentative would become yes or if the next conversation would be one more lesson in the difference between silence and peace. Dr. Eliza Warren's office looked over a thin slice of midtown winter light, turning the glass buildings the color of pewter. She kept the room simple on purpose: 2 armchairs. A sofa that didn't swallow you, a clock you could see but not stare at. I sat with my hands open on my knees, the way riggers rest a coil of rope ready to move without tangling. Across from me, my mother watched the door as if it might offer a better exit than an apology. Eliza began like a teacher who respects adults. Some families stabilize themselves by assigning roles. The golden child carries the image and receives unearned latitude. The scapegoat carries conflict and receives unearned blame. The system survives, but the people don't. She didn't look at anyone longer than she had to. We're not here to prove a thesis, we're here to retire roles. Sloane was first to breathe differently. She pulled a folded Amex statement from her tote and smoothed it with her palm as if it might cut her. December, she said. The month I was supposed to host Rome at our dining table. Line items told a story that wouldn't fit on Instagram: a 5-figure boutique, a holiday PR drop at a florist that sells apology more than flowers, 3 rush courier fees. I kept the lights on with shine, she said, voice small and honest. If I slipped, I wasn't golden anymore. She looked at me without ornament. I used you. I told myself it was family, it was laziness. My father spoke like a man paying overdue interest. I thought quiet was peace, he said. It was neglect that didn't raise its voice. He clasped his hands to keep them from apologizing for him. Eliza nodded once, then turned to Margaret the way surgeons lay a scalpel on a table and wait for the patient to agree to the cut. I am not a villain, my mother began, and for a moment she sounded exactly like every committee chair who has never been told no. I curated our standing. I organized. I fixed. She stopped when she heard the verbs. Eliza gave her the smallest of openings. What did fixing cost? The room narrowed to a silence you could balance a coin on. My mother swallowed. Control felt like love, she said finally. If I didn't control it, it could break. If it broke, I would be blamed. She blinked at me as if seeing a depth through glass. And so I blamed. Eliza slid a notepad toward her. We practice a 3-step apology. Name the behavior without explanation. Accept responsibility without but. State a concrete commitment to repair. She handed my mother a pen, then waited the way people who know grief don't rush a mourner. Margaret's hand shook once and steadied. I demanded free labor. She read aloud the words heavier than they looked. I erased your work by assigning it to your father's reputation. I spoke about you as if you were small. Her mouth trembled from habit, then held. I was wrong. The clock did its quiet work in the corner, counting a moment I had asked for my whole adult life and never expected to hear. Eliza nodded like a foreman signing off on a load test. Now step 3. Margaret set the pen down as if it might roll away. I will apologize publicly at Greenwich Crest. I will not request unpaid labor. Any service from Atlas will have a contract scope and full payment on time. I will correct anyone who miscredits your work. She looked at Sloane. We will treat the card like a budget, not a birthright. Then she looked at me and waited to be told whether that bridge could bear weight. Boundaries aren't punishment, I said. They are guardrails that keep us all out of the ditch. Power without responsibility isn't love, it's convenience. I won't live there. Eliza wrote it down, not for the file, but so someone besides me would remember it exactly. Sloane exhaled. I can do the apology with you, she said to our mother. Not as a shield, as a witness. My father nodded his assent the way men from his generation do when they understand that words are overdue and the bill is theirs to pay. Eliza closed the session with something that sounded merciful and strict at once. Repair is public, safety is private. Tonight's dinner at Greenwich Crest is not a celebration, it is a rehearsal for how this family will behave in public when the props are gone. She handed each of us a card with 3 sentences to use when the old script tries to take the microphone. I won't discuss that here. That's not accurate. Here are the facts. We can pause and resume when we're ready. In the hall, the elevator chimed like a cue light. My phone buzzed with a reminder about the run of show, and a new subject line from the club president slid into view. Confirmation of remarks. I pressed the down button and felt the weight of the building over my head. The apology would be public, the contract already was, and the kitchen at Greenwich Crest had clean plates waiting. I pictured the Waterford stemware bright under the chandeliers and wondered whether words would hold better than crystal when the room filled. The night the roles held my apartment looked like the kind of room you could trust. Floor-to-ceiling glass threw Central Park into the frame like a painting that kept breathing, and the Atlas team softened the edges with pools of warm amber table candles steady as metronomes. A narrow riser along the window carried a trio from our preferred jazz list, brushed snares and a muted horn. Just enough sound for people to say what they meant without shouting. My crew moved like they do on show day, black polos, discreet comms. The kind of choreography you only notice when it's missing. I stayed with the guests. My hands were empty on purpose. Thomas arrived first, straightening his tie as if it could anchor him. He walked the room with his eyes found, the flight cases turned into consoles, the clean cable runs, the way the service captain briefed the servers by the kitchen door. He nodded at the details he used to assign to magic and then turned to the first couple he knew from the club. "My son," he said, voice even the CEO. He didn't gesture toward a tray. He didn't ask me to fetch a coat. The sentence held. Margaret followed with Sloane, both of them dressed like people who read the invitation and understood it was not a test. My mother's hand lifted out of muscle memory when she saw the escort cards, then paused in mid-air, as if she'd remembered touching hot glass. The service captain, Joanna, dipped her head in a professional greeting and kept moving. Margaret took in the motion and for once let the room do what it was designed to do. She smoothed the front of her dress and joined the conversation the way a guest does on time and unarmed. Sloane waited until coats were checked and the first round of sparkling water had been poured. "If Atlas is open to outside PR," she said, "I'd like to submit a pitch after the holiday. Deck scope, fee structure, measurable outcomes. No assumption of award." She kept her hands at her sides, not clasped, not pleading. "If you decline, we'll both know it wasn't personal." I thanked her like I thank any vendor who reads the RFP before the room, and I meant it. The food came out in a quiet procession, not the theater of a reveal, but the confidence of a plan. Atlas doesn't cook, but we coordinate like people who respect the heat. The catering partner sent a lean team that worked shoulder to shoulder with ours. Plates landing hot and level wine poured on the beat between stories. I could feel my old reflexes tugging at me to step in to fix a napkin fold or clear a plate before a guest stood. I kept my hands in my pockets and let the professionals be professionals. Boundaries that aren't practiced are just speeches. Halfway through the main course, Thomas lifted his glass. "To work that looks easy because it isn't," he said, to the son I did not name when I should have. The room didn't applaud. It breathed. Margaret looked at him and then at me, and whatever script she'd memorized for a lifetime didn't have a page for this. She set her glass down and nodded once to Joanna when the service captain passed. It was a small nod. It mattered. At dessert, the check presenter arrived with the same neutrality it carries in every dining room. I signed the invoice as a client, not a magician, and took the extra second the line at the bottom recluse. Gratuity 25% to staff pool. I slid the folder back and caught Margaret watching my pen. She didn't flinch at the number. She watched Joanna collect the folio and said thank you, as if the words belonged to the person who had earned them. Before coffee, someone suggested a photo, and for a flicker I felt the old dread of being the one behind the camera. Joanna handed the phone to a tech who knows angles and light, and we stood in a line that wasn't a tableau from a catalog. No one held a tray, no one pointed. Central Park sat behind us winter trees like notes on a staff. I thought about every picture where I'd been blurred in the background and understood why this one felt like proof instead of propaganda. When guests pulled on coats and the jazz eased into a last chorus, Margaret stopped at the kitchen threshold like a woman at a border crossing. She looked and saw stainless counters already wiped, heard the low current of crew laughter, and did something I hadn't seen since I was a kid. She stepped back. Tonight I said so, only she could hear it. I sit at the table, not under it. She nodded without asking me to translate. After the door closed and the elevator swallowed the last chime, I walked the room once the way a captain thanks a ship. Joanna handed me a tip log for my signature. I added my initials and the date, and she smiled like professionals do when trust has been kept. On the console, my phone lit with a new subject line from Greenwich Crest Agenda Legacy Fund. I felt the room hold its balance and understood the next conversation would ask a different kind of courage. The morning after the dinner that finally felt like dinner, I took the elevator down to the conference level at the Pinnacle Resort and stepped into a room that smelled like fresh markers and new paper. Our first QBR wasn't fireworks. It was checklists and chart service levels and variance lines that stayed where you put them. Victoria's team walked through 5 properties quarter by quarter, and we set the bones of a 24-month plan. James locked in hiring waves for riggers and floor captains. Marcus held the pencil on net 30 and reminded the room that overtime is a budget line, not a rumor. When the meeting turned to legacy initiatives, I slid a single page across the table: Hale Hand's apprenticeship, named after my grandmother Eileen Hale, who taught me a broom is a tool, not a sentence. We would recruit veterans and skilled trades who needed a bridge back into steady work, paid from day one, mentored by people who know where the weight lives. Victoria read it once and said, "Do it." By afternoon, our posting went live. The inbox filled with resumes that had calluses on them, and for the first time in weeks, my phone lit for a reason that didn't carry smoke. I walked a loop around the property, listened to the Atlantic lean in, and thought about how a life changes when you decide your last name will describe your standards, not your debt. 2 days later at Greenwich Crest, the country club that had framed so many versions of us. Margaret stood at the lectern in the smaller ballroom and did what she had practiced behind a closed door. She didn't dress the words. She named the behavior I demanded: unpaid labor and miscredited professional work. She took responsibility. I said things that made my son small so I could feel large. She promised repair. All services from Atlas will be contracted and fully paid. I will correct miscredit when I hear it. There was no garnish. The club president nodded, posted the statement to the bulletin and the members' portal, and then moved the agenda to the Legacy Fund, an endowment to underwrite training for apprenticeships like ours. Thomas signed the deposit for an upcoming member event with a steady hand and the right line on the memo: Production Atlas Live. No in-kind, no family, just the name of the people who would do the work. On my way back to the city, I cut through a service alley I'd walked 100 times behind a dozen venues. A load-in was underway 3 doors down from a bakery that decorates cookies like ornaments. 2 guys shouldered a bale of folding chairs. A woman with a clipboard cleared a path with her eyes. I recognized the vendor tag on the truck. And then I saw our logo on a secondary case rolling past: Atlas Live, stamped in white. That didn't need to shout. The crew chief signed a delivery, checked a rate sheet, and asked the line captain if everyone on the call had their hours logged. No one looked toward an invisible benefactor to make the math go away. The invoice would land where it belonged, under the name that earned it. That night, I opened the mail I had been avoiding. The HOA fine for the holiday fiasco had a receipt stapled to it. The after-hours cleaning invoice was marked paid. In my head, I could still see pizza grease reflecting in Waterford crystal and hear a room go quiet in Florida. When a different kind of glass, conference room glass, separated the old story from the new. We hadn't undone a decade and a half. We had named it, priced it, and stopped the meter. When the week turned, the QBR notes were filed, the first Hail Hands cohort had its interview dates, and a thank you note from a man named Rodriguez 39 Army 2 Tours sat on my desk beneath a coaster from a club where we used to whisper. He wrote that he didn't need favors, he needed a chance to learn the board and the rig and the rhythm. I wrote back that the door would be propped open and the schedule would be honest. I didn't stand up to punish them. I stood so I wouldn't have to kneel. There's revenge that glitters and revenge that holds. The second looks like standards with signatures under them. If family is going to be public, let it be in the ways we pay our bills on time, sign our names under the work we do, and say out loud when we were wrong. The rest can be quiet finally without meaning neglect. I used to think justice would feel like a shout. It didn't. It felt like a signed invoice, a quiet room where work gets credited to the people who did it, and a family that either meets the standard or steps aside. 15 years as the unpaid help taught me how to carry weight. These last weeks taught me where to set it down. If my story gave you a reason to breathe a little deeper, subscribe and stay with me. I'm building more than stages now. I'm building a way to live without apologizing for taking up space. Tell me in the comments where you draw the line with family, what respect looks like at your table, and how you'd price your peace if you had to. I'll read every word, and now the question I can't stop asking: when loyalty and dignity collide, which one do you protect first?